This episode of Truth Table is brought to you by Baker Books, a division of Baker Publishing Group, which seeks to build up the body of Christ through books that are relevant, intelligent, and engaging. Visit bakerbooks.com. Sisters, how y'all feel? Brothers, y'all all right? If this is your first time at Truth Table, welcome to the table. And if you've been sitting at the table with us all these years, we are so grateful that you have been listening to us through these years, and we are inviting you to partner with us and support our work at patreon.com/truthstable. Now pull up a chair and have a seat at the table with us. Hey y'all, welcome to Truth Table, Midwives of Culture for Grace and Truth. I'm Ekemini.
And I'm Christina.
This table is built by Black women and for Black women. So welcome to the table, C. How you doing, girl?
I am, you know what? I'm doing well because we have a guest today.
Yes, we do.
Listen, a guest in person.
This is our first in-person interview.
What? I know.
Yeah.
Well, and so we've like on site sometimes, but this is our first, I think,
have we done
polished, formal.
Yeah. Our first video recorded.
Yes.
In person.
In this way.
Interview.
Yes.
In this way.
In the brown chairs.
Yes, exactly. So we are so excited to bring to the table our dear sister, Reverend Barbara D. Jones. Welcome to the table, sis. How you doing?
Yes.
Thank you for having me at the table. What a blessing.
Yes. I mean, well, and that's one of her titles, but
yes.
I think the way that I know you, Barbara, really is as friend. And just such a gift. It's just, it's a real honor to have you here. There's sometimes we get to interview people and chat with people that we try to commend to our audience and say like, you should be so lucky.
That's right.
To know this person.
That's right.
And that is how I feel about knowing Barbara Jones. So thank you for being here. Now we're going to formally introduce you to our people who don't know who you are. And Ekemi's going to introduce you to the community.
We are. So we have our sister, Barbara Jones here, and we're talking about missionary, what it means to be a missionary and to be on mission for God. So let me tell you a little something about our sister, Reverend Barbara Jones, okay? Barbara Jones serves as founder and president of Walking Anew, Incorporated, an organization that aims to create dignified and unified communities for Black and Brown people locally and globally. Walking Anew has served various communities throughout the nation since 2017. Barbara has served in various countries leading missional teams around the world and utilizes her expertise to effectively aid and disciple others in creating biblical unity and developing intercultural competencies. We need that.
My man. We have a deficit.
She is a qualified administrator of the Intercultural Development Inventory, an executive coach, speaker, and ordained minister who serves in partnership with the Christian Cultural Intelligence Group. As a leader, missionary, and consultant for the past 28 years, Barbara has developed several training modules to educate, coach hundreds of executive leaders in government, corporate, denominational ministries, and communities. She travels extensively as a speaker and has been invited into several podcast communities. And now Truth Table. Hey. And we are so excited to have you here at the table with us, Barbara.
I'm excited to be here with my sister friend.
Yes. I mean, all of those things. One of the things that what first just stands out to me is God's grace in your life and the path that led you to become on mission for God. Yeah. And I wonder to what extent you would feel comfortable just introducing yourself. We did the bio, but introduce yourself as a woman who came to be pulled into God's mission.
Yes.
What would you want people to know about you?
Yeah, I mean, part of my testimony is the fact that I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. And through that journey, I always say I can minister to a tree because we learned how to do rote engagement. And I think that set me up for what God was going to do in my life later. At 27, I wasn't a believer as a child, didn't really know about Christianity or church. In fact, I pushed it away because of a lot of fears. Right. But I became a believer at 27.
Okay.
I'm so thankful that I didn't grow up with a lot of the traditions that helped me to think outside of the box when it comes to loving people. But at 27, when the Lord called me to himself, he just did a really quick work. He made me understand what evangelism was, immediately put me in spaces where I could engage and call people to Christ. And within about 2 years, I found myself leaving Chicago as a new believer, landing on a church plant team with the Evangelical Covenant Church as a missionary and associate pastor and working with Campus Crusade. And I didn't even know what a missionary was,
Wow.
Right.
but I was one, and I was living on support, so that helped me to learn what a missionary was
I know
really
that's
quickly. Lord, please send the money.
That part.
The support raising part is what taught me that, okay, this is what it means to live on mission. I have to trust God. I have to lean on him. I can't expect people to fill any of my gaps. I have to trust him to do that, and maybe prayerfully he will use people. And that's, that was the beginning of the journey for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Barbara. Even saying like, I don't even really know what a missionary is, but you found out when you're like, oh, I got to raise the point.
So you're like, a missionary is me.
That's me. Okay.
I am it.
Can you talk, because missionary, that language, it's kind of esoteric. It's kind of an enigma for, I think, people outside of the church.
It's political
or even in
and
church.
loaded.
Or even in particular traditions may not know really what a missionary is, what a missionary does, especially in the U.S. context. What does that look like? And what does it even mean to raise support? For the person that completely has no idea what a missionary is, what did you mean by having the raise support? And what does it mean to be a missionary?
Yeah. I mean, this is a loaded discussion.
Sure.
Because there are definitions of missions and spaces and predominantly white spaces where they define that if you do A, B, C and complete this, then you can be called a missionary.
Right.
But in general, I don't think that's a biblical definition. That's an organizational definition. And that's why I didn't know I was a missionary. So I can speak about the definition of being a missionary from my experience and perspective. When the Lord called me, there was a process of him reminding me of how he has gifted me to serve in the context that he had called me to. It's not a place I would have chosen, but once I got there, I was very excited about being there and utilizing my gifts, but also being in a place where I could continue to grow and be stretched. That served me in my first context very well because I connected with it. It was kind of love at first sight. I was in the hood. Had experienced life in the hood. I was serving people who looked like me, who had needs like I had once had, and I was able to use my gift to help plant and create a church space for those people to come into and an opportunity to disciple women. But then the Lord called me into another context. And I didn't choose that one either. But I would not have chosen that one for sure. But in praying, I'm like, Lord, I know that you've called me to serve the church. This is not necessarily the church, but this is a place where your people need more of Christ, dare I say. They need to see Christ lived out. And in and of my own strength, I know that I can't do that, but I'm a willing vessel to respond to the call and to go. And so I went into that context, serving totally outside of myself, totally having to rely on the Lord, totally trusting him to provide, etc. So going back, talking about provisions, 2 different missional contexts. The first context, I had to rely on donors and thank the Lord for organizations at the time that could come alongside you and help you to understand what support raising even is. It served me well in my later life. I had a group of people that loved me, that believed in God's call on my life, and I asked them if they would support me in this endeavor, if they believed God was calling me. And it wasn't like the typical, let me go through this list, let me call these people. I individually had to reach out to these folk to ask them if they would be willing to support me. They didn't support me through an organization. They sent the funds directly to me, and I filtered them through the church at the time, but the church allowed me to make sure my rent was paid.
Yeah.
Make sure I had gas in the car so I can get to the church to do ministry. And they made sure I had food to eat and I could basically take care of myself when deficits were low. But also those funds were not just used for me to navigate ministry, but also it gave me the freedom and flexibility to do discipleship. So to take someone out to lunch, or to have a group of women together for fellowship, or to do an outreach event. And so that was really a blessing to me, just having the accountability of the church, but also the freedom to do the work that God had called me to. And it was an amazing experience. I left that space when my 4-year term ended, asking the Lord, like literally crying one day, what do I do next? Because this is not a traditional job. Right. So where do I go? What do I do? Yeah. And the Lord, a phone call came in and I found myself working for this agency. And I realized very quickly that this is not just a job. This is not just provision. I want to do a work here in you and in them.
Yes. Yes.
And so it became that kind of Abrahamic experience. I always had those in my life where I didn't know where I was going, but I followed and the Lord landed me there. You know, it's not a mission that I would have dreamt up, but it was the mission God called me to.
Sure. That's right.
And in calling me there, it's where he continued my sanctification journey, shaping me, but also using me in great ways. And now I can say that.
Yeah, when you're in it, it's like, out, get me out.
Yeah, now I can say that. Now I can see that nothing in that missional experience was wasted.
Come on.
I wouldn't be doing the work that I'm doing now had I not traveled the globe. That's right. Had not met you at an IDI training.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Well, I met you before that, but gone through that. I just see how the Lord put all the pieces together. And the opportunity to lead Black and brown people on mission outside of that context. Lord, he really not just used it for them, he used it for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of them appreciated the gift, and some the Lord will have to deal with.
That's right.
Because I was a gift to the community of service.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, we're not responsible for how what people do with the gifts that are placed in front of them, including the gift of our own ministry.
Yeah.
Right. We're not responsible for what ends up ultimately happening there.
Amen.
We're stewards.
Amen.
And that's I think that's a powerful reminder. You know, when I think about the things that have shaped me in my early life or in ministry work for what I do now, I agree with you. At the time, you don't think like, what is the point of this?
Yeah.
Do you have an example of kind of a specific experience where at the time you're like, what in the world? Or you just, or whether it was difficult or whether it just seemed unimportant or just not spectacular. But now you can look back on it and say, wow, God, you were doing a work through the small things or the difficult things, and I'm using it now.
Yeah, the difficult things always rise to the top.
Yeah.
Because, you know, God does a real deep work in the difficult things. Teaching me how to wait on the Lord.
Well,
Wait, I say. And after having done all the things, wait. That the Bible became alive to me in a way that, I don't know that I ever would have experienced. Yeah. Especially the lament, the long suffering, being kind, you know, outside of yourself, and then the joy of the Lord as your strength.
Yeah.
I have a lot of examples. But I also have these ideas in my head of when the Lord gave me a voice that I didn't have coming into the space.
Sure.
Just being the humble, meek, mild missionary. You know? Didn't ever lose that, but the way it showed up changed over time. And I think the Lord was teaching me along the way how to be bold, how to use my voice, how to trust him to ask for the hard things. Because I wasn't seen in the context as a missionary, the benefits of being a missionary weren't offered to me.
Right.
And so I had to learn in the same way that I had to ask in the early days for support raising.
That's right.
I had to ask for what I needed.
Yeah.
And I had to ask for things that were lined up with the call that God had given me. And so it took a lot of long suffering. That became my mantra, you know, that long suffering was what a missionary is supposed to do.
Right.
And I'm thankful that the Lord began to shift that narrative, especially as I got to see firsthand as discipling other missionaries who were going out and abroad. I got to see that, wait a minute, I'm a missionary here. I deserve some of those same benefits, not just for me, but for the people we're trying to invite in, which happen to be Black and brown people.
For sure.
It's like, how are we going to shift the narrative so that, and just the systems, so that we create access?
Sure.
And if I'm in the house and don't have access,
Come
on now,
then why are we inviting other people in? And so the Lord shaped my voice. I still had to remain in long suffering, but the gift of being kind in that space was something he developed to not allow people to steal my joy. And so it was a journey, but the narrative of the meek, mild, humble, you know, especially in our Black context, they sit on the front row in the church and they're the ones that go out and evangelize and tell the girls to wear their dress below, you know. That narrative has to shift, and I think it has shifted for a lot of Black and brown missionaries. And I'm excited that there are many more Black and brown missionaries out in global spaces, but those that are working in majority white spaces understand that they're there because it's a mission, and they are missionaries.
That's right. That's right.
That's good.
You know, we have our own narrative of learning directly from Barbara Jones on an international trip that she took us about 4 years ago.
Many occasions.
And many occasions, but also I'm thinking specifically of a trip that you took us on about 4 years ago, and which doesn't seem, I mean, think about that, 4 years ago.
I'm telling
And
you.
I would love for us to get into that a little bit and more about your story when we come back from our commercial break.
Wonderful.
Yes. Crowned with Glory by Jasmine L. Holmes explores the stories and writings of men and women, both familiar and lesser known, who formed an enormous movement of Black Americans demanding the liberty they were promised and deserved. She reveals how their understanding that the image of God lives in each human shaped their faith, the abolitionist movement, and American and church history. With detailed research made accessible to everyday readers, this book will be an eye-opening and inspiring resource for anyone looking for a robust Christian history of resistance that centers Black stories and faith. Truth Table listeners can save 40% off of Crowned with Glory when they order at bakerbookhouse.com using the code CROWNED40. That's bakerbookhouse.com. Use the promo code CROWNED40 to receive 40% off of your order of Crowned with Glory.
So we are back, and we are still here with the Barbara Jones. And you know, I had alluded to that you took us on a trip, and I found it to be so transformative, and I learned a ton about myself in going on that trip with you. But it was a trip to South Africa 4 years ago, and from your vantage point, talk about that journey. One, why did you take us?
Step one
of all the. I'm glad you did.
Amen.
I'm glad you
Amen.
did.
You know how we do. We be cutting up.
We do. But yeah, just let our listeners in on the process of who you choose to journey with you. Because not only are you a missionary,
That's right.
I would say that you are a woman of great hospitality, that you in patience take others on journeys with you.
Patience,
Amen.
absolutely.
Amen. Yeah, so that trip was very dear to me because it was one of the last ones I got to take in that context. So that particular trip, having to extend hospitality to two different groups was a challenge for me and an opportunity. Number one, we're inviting people into a space that's already pretty toxic in terms of accepting us. And so my job was to make it a space where we can all enter in and feel protected.
Yes.
And if we had issues or factions between us, and I'm just going to call it what it is. In my perspective, I lived a very assimilated life in this missional context. I learned how to navigate and to do and to be all the things that I needed to do to survive and not stand out, to not feel the pain of the biases or the aggressions that would happen. Yes. And so in going out and recruiting or mobilizing Black and brown missionaries to come in, I had to think about what I was inviting them into, what trauma they may experience, and each team did. And also, were they ready? Yeah. Were they the people that God was calling into this particular short-term mission in a way that would cause flourishing for them and for others? And in that particular trip, what made it significant is that these two groups were very different. Right. One was ready, and one was having to still navigate the lifestyle of assimilation. And I recognize that because I lived there for so long. Right. But the group that was ready happened to be your group. And so in mobilizing you all, it was sort of a dream for me to be able to do missions that centered around racial reconciliation from a biblical perspective. So God put that together over a dinner, us discussing it, us dreaming about it, and then the Lord provided all the resources, and you guys raised support, and it was a beautiful mission on many levels. But I think the most significant moment for me, I have two, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Two significant moments were around the gathering of the two groups and the dynamics and the opportunity for reconciliation and discussion to happen. But in that context, Micah was there, and the missionaries who had sort of separated themselves from the mission until they saw that you guys were there. Now they wanted to be all over it, right? They didn't want to deal with me as a Black woman bringing a team, but when they saw the team, they were like, oh, we want them to do all the things in our white spaces because that's missions. Look at who we've brought and what we're doing. And we had a very clear mission on our particular team. We were not doing that. We came for a particular mission. That's right. The calling was to the communities that had oftentimes been isolated in our white missional spaces. And I just remember some of the leadership coming up to Micah. We were standing in line about to go for a meal. And there was a president of an organization there. I won't name that person. And then there were leaders on our missional team there that came up, never spoke to me, looked straight to Micah as a male and said, we would really love for you to do A, B, C, and D. And Micah just very graciously turned around and said, well, Barbara's our boss. That's so right. You need to bring it through her. That's right. Typically, I would never get that if I was on a team, even leading a team where there was another white male. They would just step in and had stepped in as if they were in charge, just ignoring my very presence. And so that was a beautiful moment of God's reminder that I could stand and operate in what he's called me to be. And I took it, I ran with it, I gotta say, on many levels. And so we just were saying no and no and no to the things that space wanted. And we entered into some beautiful communities that they said were dangerous, that they don't go to, blah, blah, blah. And the Lord blessed us in those spaces. And the second moment was, it's not a good moment, but it was connected to just trying to reconcile, but recognizing the pain that was caused. Because we get so caught up, and I saw this in our missional space. If this particular church calls, we drop everything for them. Why? Because they give all the money. We were trained to do that. And we were like, we're not going to let money drive the work of God.
That's right.
They're not the ones providing. He is.
Amen.
They're a conduit. He allowed them to give. They are not the ones we should be honoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for our Black and brown brothers who are working and serving in these contexts where funding is coming from sources that can pull their string at any minute, it creates this longevity and assimilation and fear and a lack of trust in the Lord. And I'm thankful, not that I'm perfect in that, but I'm thankful that the Lord steered me away from relying on man to be my provider.
Yes.
And so when we gathered together one evening, the lament that happened and the prayers that came forth and the releasing, I think, that happened of walking away from that assimilated life and or context or people, not trying to need them anymore. That was amazing to me. And it changed my life because you all spoke, I think with missions, we are all on mission if we are believers. God calls us to something. And I think I was leading a team, you all, but you all were being used to point me in a whole new direction because I started the nonprofit after that meeting. And that's what I'm doing today. By God's grace, and leading Black and brown people on mission. And I will take anyone on the mission, but my primary focus is to lead Black and brown people to the mission field, to expose them and to give them a vision for serving either locally or globally. And so that's the work that I get to do now without someone pulling my purse strings and telling me how to do it. So those things were significant. So, I
love that. Thank you for sharing.
I love you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
You are very easy to love.
Yes, you are. I hadn't realized that trip was that transformative for you to the point that it actually helped to push you to start, anew and walking anew. And now that is what you're doing. Thinking about the landscape of South Africa, our experiences there together collectively, and with the backdrop of the more recent dialogue and modern dialogue about missions and people equating that with neocolonialism and imperialism and how because of the ways, let me say that missions have been perverted, misconstrued, have been the missionary mandate has been co-opted, by so many. How, as a Black woman missionary, do you parse through God's great commission, which Jesus has given to us, his very last words, to his disciples and to us as well, is to go therefore and make disciples. How do we hold on to that and critique and rightfully see the ways that mission has been manipulated and co-opted and used unfortunately, for evil and nefarious means. But then also, how does one continue to move as a Black missionary? Just through that muddy reality, So how do you how do you walk the line of that tension?
You've already named all the things.
I like to name things.
It's all of the things that you are having to move in and through, and to understand how to vocalize something different, how to live out a different narrative, but also speak to all of that. That's part of my calling now. And that's why I say nothing is wasted. The Lord allowed me to see the underbellies of what missional work could look like, and to learn all about the systems. I've written policy manuals. I've done all the things under my assimilated life. But I learned so much from that. And so now I get to work with organizations, number one, helping
Wonderful.
them to reshape their policies and procedures so that they can be more welcoming. That's going to take a long time,
Sure.
but
Right.
the work has to start, you know?
Right.
Yes.
But
Right.
the way that I navigate it now, especially running a nonprofit, is to always sort of have that mirror reminding me of what a lack of flourishing looks like, what a lack of dignity looks like, number one, and getting to decide who funds what we do. We don't just want everybody funding us.
That's right.
Yes.
You know, and we're not a wealthy organization, but we want people who have a heart for the people that we're trying to serve. And our policies don't necessarily exclude people from doing God's work. He's the only one that gets to cancel us, right? But
Say that
folk
again.
are welcome to come. We do still assess,
That's right.
but not with such stringent rules. I think that's one side of it, but the damage that has been done and is still being done in global spaces, wow. A reckoning, I think, will happen, because in the midst of that, when you tease it out, the gospel is still there. It was there before they arrived, before missionaries arrived. And in fact, one of my bents is that, if you go back and really look at the church fathers, it wasn't our white missionaries that started the mission, but we won't go there. But those aspects of having resources and ability to go and to do a work, but you create these policies and these structures that parcel out Black and brown people in a way that they become not a part of the team in the way that they should. They don't get to flourish in the same way because we don't shift culture. Well, I could talk about that a lot. It's a soapbox for me. I've been recently talking to some of our female missionaries who are serving with organizations, just sort of asking them, how has it been for you? Now, two of them that I recently spoke with left the organization that I was with.
Okay.
And I just said, can we revisit that? I know in the moment why you left, but I want to revisit that. A lot of it was the support raising structures,
For sure.
the member care. There was no real care for them, for their Black and brown needs, even related to support raising. There was no shifting in how you navigate raising support in a Black and brown context versus the majority culture context. There were policies that I call stop signs. If you don't jump through these hoops and do these things, then you can't be with us.
Sure.
And really, that system was set up to weed out those individuals.
Absolutely.
It's like set up to say that if you don't fit this little white box that we have, then you might want to go somewhere else. And I mean, it's true and it's real. I've worked with several global agencies, and it is what it is. And the impact on the field for me is walking into a church in Asia or Africa or Latin America, and it looks like the U.S.
Right.
We're erasing culture because we've created this mindset of what biblical culture should look like.
Right.
And nowhere do you find that in the Bible. Nowhere.
Nowhere. You're right.
So, yeah.
So helpful.
I don't know if I got to your question, but
No,
Listen,
you did
but
that.
you gave us an answer.
amen, girl.
Well, and I think that's just a sobering reminder about what it is that we think is biblical, that is so out of step with the New Testament, right?
Amen.
With the New Testament church, even the early church, we are.
That's right.
I think in some ways we've lost an imagination for what that looks like, and instead we're putting into place things from the 1600s or the 1950s, for that matter, that is so disconnected from the reality of what the early church actually looked like. I think in listening to you speak, it is a reminder of, much pay, much say, and why it is important to have an ability to say no to money.
Yep.
And I think whether that's a podcast, whether that
Anything.
is who wants to advertise with you, whether that's a church,
have
the
a
ability
code.
to be able to walk away is an act of faith.
Yes.
Yep.
And because we know that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, that is a test for us. And we do need to eat. We need resources. We need our lights on, right? But the ability to say, I will wait on God
Yeah.
instead of being entangled into something that is going to compromise my witness.
Yes.
Is just again, I think it's an act of faith.
Amen.
To do that, to live that way. And you have been a woman who has modeled faith,
Amen.
even as you were in difficult circumstances, still modeling faith and persistence and hospitality and kindness in those places. So somebody's listening right now and they are thinking, I've never thought about being a missionary.
Yep.
I love God and I love people, and I'm in this small bubble of a place. I can't even imagine myself ever leaving the place where I am. I've never traveled out of my city. I've never really traveled out of my neighborhood. I've never really even been on a plane. And I want you to give them an imagination for all the places that God can take.
God can take them.
Oh,
Yep.
my. Yeah. So, yeah, I am you. I grew up in the projects. I come from a life of lack. And I only had dreams, right, of places I could go. First, it was within the American context, like when our family went to Florida for Disney World. It was like, hurrah, we made it out of Chicago, you know, but it opened my mind up to this idea that, you know, there's nothing too hard for God,
That's
number
right.
one.
That's
and
right.
if he's calling us to it, he'll give us a way through it. And I would say, if the Lord has been prompting, nicking at your heart to do something more, then explore ways to do that. The mission field is ripe for the harvest. And we need more Black and brown people than ever, because the world is Black and brown.
Yes,
and we really need voices that understand struggle, that understands leaning on the Lord instead of themselves, their education, their skill set, just leaning on the Lord to bring all of who you are into the lives of people who are waiting to have hope, to say, you know, you made it, maybe I can make it too.
That's right. That's right.
And instead of, you know, the posture of coming to be the savior, we're coming alongside. And so Walking Anew, which the Lord gave me in 96 at the church. It was women walking anew, because these were women coming out of prostitution and drug addiction and stuff like that. And 20 some years later, it's become expanded where we do local missions in our own backyard. But the goal is to identify individuals who have never gone overseas and then take them on a trip. So we got to do that this year. We took a young lady who had never traveled. She went to Kenya. She's a videographer. So her mission was to capture the trip. That's a mission. So whatever skill set you have, if you feel God calling you to do more, ask him, what does more look like? And then do the research and see if there are organizations out there that line up with who God has made you to be.
Yes.
Do your homework.
Do your homework.
And then go and experience that. Yeah. And don't let funding or finances be the thing that holds you back. If the Lord is calling you again, he'll provide a way.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you are giving them some practical steps. Definitely start with prayer. And if you feel that the Spirit is tugging on that hard and kind of, we know that feeling. Don't ignore it, continue to move forward, and then just even your example of faith, of just walking by faith. Like, you didn't know initially you were called to be a missionary. You didn't even know at first you were a missionary until, and then, but the Lord just began to illuminate, that for you. So thank you for just providing some of those practical ways for people to begin to discern whether the Lord is calling them to this, or maybe God is calling them to something else. I would love for you to talk to as we're wrapping, talk to our sisters at the table about Walking Anew, or they can get connected with your work or donate. This is your time just to tell them how to follow you, follow your work, and to support.
Yeah, we're on the platforms. So walkinganew.org or at Walking Anew on Insta and all the other things. And we really, really love working in our own backyard. I missed that when I was working for an organization. I would come home and get in my backyard and serve the people in my community. And so if you're in Atlanta, come and volunteer with us. We would love that. But if you're interested in global missions, reach out to us as well. We do on a monthly basis gather women. Our audience are the non-churched. So if you know someone in the Atlanta area who is opposed to church, those are the people that we want to hang out with. Amen. We do a BYOB, bring your own Bible, bottle, whatever you want the B to stand for. And we sit around and we talk about life issues and we delve into scripture to dismantle some of those disbeliefs. I think you've been a part of that before. And so we do that every first Friday. We go out and do missions in the community every other month, just depending on what's happening. And once every 2 years, we take a mission trip. So during those 2 years, we're identifying individuals to bring them along. But we also welcome other people to come and go on mission with us. Our next trip is gearing up for 2024 in August. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Oh, and I'm leaving out the part that I love the most, because it's really what I do the most in our organization, is the intercultural development. Our volunteers that are, even some of our volunteers of color, it doesn't matter because of assimilation, we don't allow them to have front or firsthand contact with our audience. We don't allow picture taking. Right. We don't want to pimp people out, their images out, their stories out. We just want to love them and show them dignity. So we train our volunteers using the intercultural competence model, some more extensively than others. And we also train churches and organizations. So lately I've been working with a lot of global, missional, or trafficking, et cetera, agencies that are engaged around the world, helping them to rethink some of their systems and their models. That's a passion of mine, to kind of bring those two together, to do the work, but to also train and disciple leaders of churches and organizations, Christian and non-Christian alike.
Well,
that's Walking Anew. It's amazing that the Lord gave me that title all those years ago. And now I'm entering into this space where I am walking anew.
That's right.
So it's really like, he's a full circle God. Yeah. He has a plan.
Yeah, there's no loose threads in God.
None.
Everything is always sewed up at some point.
Amen.
At some point. At some point, thank you so much, Barbara. I have absolutely been the beneficiary of your hospitality, of your generosity and kindness in friendship. And I'm so grateful. And I did get to sit in on and participate in your BYOB Bible study. Oh, baby, probably. I'm sure. Oh, yeah, I guess I did. Yeah. I guess I did. Yeah. I had a great, it was wonderful. That's how I met, some of your dear friends and mentees. And it was a joy. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you so much for taking the time and sitting at the table.
Thank you for having me at the table.
Of course. Yeah. And to our sisters, of course, we want to thank you for taking a seat at the table with us. Let's keep the conversation going. Talk to us about what you think about our interview with our friend, Reverend Barbara D. Jones, missionary extraordinaire. Please tweet us your thoughts. Send us your DMs on Instagram. Email us your thoughts too at asktruthstable@gmail.com. Don't forget to rate and review the show on iTunes as well. And we also have a discipleship group on Facebook. So make sure that you follow us on Facebook. Answer the entry questions, and you will be let into the group so that we can do more talking about the things that we care about, particularly Jesus, of course. Our executive producer for the show is myself and Christina, and we will see you soon on the next Truth Table. Bye, y'all.